Hey guys, it's Scott with Scottie B Cards, and in this video, I want to talk all about Julio Rodriguez heading into the 2023 Major League Baseball season. Every single year we have a player who has a ton of hype heading into the season. This last year it was Wander Franco, and then before that we had players like Luis Robert, we had Tatis, we had Soto, we had Acuna, Judge, we had all these different players through the last decade that we had all this hype heading into the season, and this year it's Julio Rodriguez. And every once in a while you can pair that hype with someone who's really good, like a Juan Soto, like an Acuna, like a Judge, like a Trout, and these players tend to have their card values be above everybody else's in the hobby. I want to discuss if Julio Rodriguez deserves to have that hype and if his cards are sustainable. I first want to show if I think he's a good player, show where if there's any holes in his game, where he's good, and we'll discuss from there. So let's just dive into this right out of the gate. Let's look at his stats from last year. I do want to point out I have Baseball Reference here and I have Fangraphs here. I like both sites. Both show a different story of the same player, so I wanted to compare them. You'll see that he had 6.2 WAR according to Baseball Reference, 5.3 WAR according to Fangraphs. Generally, Baseball Reference rewards players who provide good defense. Julio Rodriguez was a plus defender last year, so he has more Baseball Reference WAR. Fangraphs is more averagey, and bad defenders can have higher WAR totals on that site for that purpose. But Julio Rodriguez, all-around five-tool player, it's pretty obvious, and for that purpose, he has good WAR on both sides. He's interesting because he has good traditional stats, like 28 home runs and 25 stolen bases, plus a 284 batting average isn't bad, especially for this last year. Plus, he has good advanced metrics like 6.2 WAR, 147 OPS plus, and we'll get to percentile rankings in a moment, but those are also really good. So he appeases the traditional crowd, the sabermetric crowd, everybody in between, which is why he's so collected and in demand right now. On top of that, people want to be on the bandwagon, and he is the hot player for good reason. I do want to dive a little bit deeper than these numbers, but I want to point out he was a top 10 MVP candidate this last year. He won the Rookie of the Year, was an All-Star and a Silver Slugger. Really great to see that performance, and I think in the future he could have multiple Gold Gloves and multiple Silver Sluggers as well. So here's his percentile ranking. What this shows you, if it says 99 right here, that means he's in the 99th percentile, meaning he's better than 99% of Major League Baseball players at that thing. If you see the 20 percentile, it means 80% of Major League Baseball is actually better than he is, and he's only better than 20% at that thing. Red is good, blue is bad, pink is okay. So we can see right here, 99 percentile in max exit velocity. He literally hit the ball harder than almost everybody in Major League Baseball, which is impressive. Maybe not Yordan Alvarez, maybe not Giancarlo Stanton, but he's right there. That just shows that he has all the power in the world. His average exit velocity is better than 92% in Major League Baseball. Hard hit percentage is really high. Barrel percentage is really high. It takes into consideration hard hit percentage and launch angle, because if you hit the ball hard at the right launch angle, you get a lot of doubles, home runs, triples, and just hits in general. His strikeout rate was pretty dang high, so it shows that he did not have a great strikeout rate. That's because he struck out a lot. I think it was 25%. His walk rate was low. I think about an 8% walk rate. He swings and misses a lot, and he chases out of the zone. Where Julio Rodriguez is so unique is he has a great sprint speed, 98th percentile, one of the fastest players in baseball, outs above average, one of the best defenders in Major League Baseball, at a premium position in center field. He is always getting good reads and good jumps, and he has good arm strength. So he's basically a five-tool player, like we already said. He fits the traditional young superstar mold, like we saw with Acuna, like we saw with someone like even Griffey, just fast, good defender, good offensive player. He's good all around. As he ages, these blue metrics right here will probably go up, and these sprint speeds and arm strength and defense will probably go down. That's traditionally what happens while offense improves. Someone like Juan Soto is very unique because he's only 24, and he's not a great defender, but he is elite everywhere else except for sprint speed and defense, so he's more of an old man in a young player's body, and that's why Juan Soto has put up such great numbers. But if Julio can harness that same type of a thing, same patience if needed, while still having the same power, that's where we see a really good ball player. Yordan Alvarez was very similar as well to that. Okay, so that's percentile rankings. It just shows he is a true five-tool player. Now let's talk about defense even more. I might be one of the few baseball card collectors who care about defense, but that's because that usually helps your WAR totals, and if it helps your WAR totals, it actually helps your overall card values, which sounds silly, but there's a reason why players who are like 135 OPS plus guys but have 7 to 8 WAR are considered top 5 MVP candidates. That's because of the fact that they provide amazing value. So I just mentioned the stat OPS plus. What that is, Julio Rodriguez had an OPS plus of 147 this last year. That's actually an offensive metric where it takes the OPS of the entire league and it compares you to league average. So Julio Rodriguez was actually 47% better than league average according to that metric, which is really impressive. Ken Griffey Jr. had like a 137 OPS OPS plus for his career. Derek Jeter's like a 115 OPS plus for his career. And obviously those two players had their down years in their 30s that caused that to be lower. But either way, a 147 is really good. Mike Trout has the highest OPS plus ever for a right-handed hitter at 176, I believe. And so he's not at that level, but he's at the superstar level when it comes to offensive abilities, which I think is great. But defense, we can still see, according to outs above average, this is how many outs he provided at that position over the average center fielder that would have replaced him. And we can see he provided 9 outs above average for a center fielder, which is 5th amongst all center fielders. Baseball Reference likes his defense. Fangraphs likes his defense. The one metric that doesn't love it as much is going to be defensive runs saved. And defensive runs saved is a traditional defensive metric as well. Same concept. It adds runs over the course of a year. He still was above average with 3 defensive runs saved. So while not necessarily elite, he was still average to above average, which is great for a young player age 21. The crazy thing, like I just said, he is 21 years old, which is very impressive because that's one of the most important things when buying baseball cards, which sounds silly, but when you're expecting a card to go up in value, if a player can have a breakout season at age 21 or 22, they're going to have much more demand than a player who has a breakout season at age 27 to 28. And the reason for that is because we're always speculating on the Hall of Fame, and if a player can debut early and start accumulating stats and awards, that's how you get to the Hall of Fame. I actually did the numbers before. I think there's only been like 1 or 2 players that debuted past age 24, 25 that actually made the Hall of Fame, and one of them was a relief pitcher, Mariano Rivera. So it just shows how important that early debut and that early success is, and he has it. On top of that, by the Zips 3-year projections from Fangraphs, he is projected to continue to keep playing well for at least the next 3 years, increasing his home runs every year, his WAR every year, his OPS every year. So I think we all agree that he has the tools and the ceiling is really high. It's all about health at this point and not having a sophomore slump. Even if he does, he still has this really high ceiling in comparison to other players. I want to look at his splits, his platoon splits, home and away splits, and his first and second half splits. I wanted to look at this T OPS plus. What this references is if it was 100 and 100, that means they're equal. That means he is just as good against righties versus lefties, but this shows that he's actually a little bit better versus righties than lefties. Not a huge difference. We see a wider gap right here. This is a pretty significant gap, and this right here is an even bigger gap. And these bigger gaps just show he's better at one thing versus something else. So this just shows he is more of a reverse splits guy where he hits right-handed pitchers really well, which is good because we have a lot more right-handed pitchers than lefties. His slugging is a little bit higher. His on-base is a little bit lower. Batting average is higher. Overall, he provides more power with 21 home runs with less appearances, obviously. 425 plate appearances versus 135. But we still have a better offensive player against righties. Home versus away, we see more benefits at his home ballpark, which is totally fine because he plays half of his games there. And we do see he's still really good on the road. First and second half, this is what I wanted to show. He was significantly better in the second half. And we can see basically April was his worst month by a long shot. If we deleted April and just had his stats here, and let's say he had less games, 20 less games, and had 110 games versus 130, he would have had a significantly higher OPS plus, significantly higher batting average, significantly higher everything, and would be saying how much better his season was. But because it got dragged down a little bit, it's not a big deal. But Julio is showing heading into next year that he had a hot second half, which is a good sign for 2023. He completely skipped AA, and because he skipped AA, it took him a second to adjust to the pitching, because usually AAA can be tough when you're adjusting. There's a lot of quadruple A type players there who made it to the big leagues and then bounced back in between, but he went straight from AA to the big leagues, and it shows that in the second half, he did better. On top of that, umpires really screwed him over in the first half. If you're a Mariners fan, you know what I'm talking about. They would call a lot of strikes on him that were not strikes. Okay, he may have gotten a little bit lucky. If we look at his BABIP, which is batting average on balls in play, meaning all the balls he put in play this last year, he had a 345 batting average. Generally, the good players have a higher BABIP, and that's just because they hit the ball hard or they can hit the ball to a place where they're not. But either way, it is really high. The average BABIP is like 280 to 300. So I would not be surprised if we see some regression there. On top of that, his expecting batting average was a 254. So according to StatCast, based off of where he hit the ball, how hard he hit the ball, launch angle, all those things, they expected it to be a 254, which is still good for expected batting average. But his BABIP shows he was a little lucky, and this shows he might have been a little bit lucky as well. But none of those are a huge concern for me because he was 21 years old. And I think the banning of the shift will probably help him as he probably pulls the ball quite a bit. And for that purpose, it will be okay. But that's the one thing I found that wasn't necessarily great. All right, let's talk about baseball cards. He has a ton of sets. That's one huge negative about Julio Rodriguez rookie cards is he has a lot of sets. I've made a video about which ones to target that you can watch after. I'll have it on the end screen for you. This is just a fraction of how many cards he actually has. I pulled from a video from last summer. There's significantly more than this now. I want to compare his pricing to other rookies from this year. We have him, Wander Franco, Bobby Witt. Julio goes for about $2,500. Wander Franco goes for about $1,300, and a Bobby Witt goes for about $960. $317. This is for a base PSA 10 Bowman Chrome autograph. And you can see Julio has the most PSA 10s by a pretty comfortable margin. So it just shows his market cap is significantly higher, which means, is he overpriced? Potentially. Let's compare him to Juan Soto and Acuna, who were the previous big guys that people were chasing that had a lot of hype, like I mentioned. And Juan Soto, he has 264 PSA 10s at $3,700 a piece for a market cap of almost $1 million, while Acuna has hardly any PSA 10s, 127, about $2,000 each, so less than both of Julio and Soto for a smaller market cap of $250,000. And he had a tough year last year coming off of injury, but Julio is in between both of them. So I wanted to show that. I also want to show the PSA 10 Bowman Chrome base card of other Hall of Fame caliber players on a Hall of Fame path. Mookie Betts has 206 PSA 10s. Arenado has 21 is all. And Manny Machado has 105. Machado is about $600 for his last sold, while Arenado is about $1,000 for his last sold. And Mookie's about $1,400 for his last sold. This just shows again that Julio has significantly higher values. You can basically buy almost all three of these for the same price. Not quite, it's $3,000, but pretty close. All three of these Hall of Fame caliber players for one Julio Rodriguez. So is he overvalued? He basically has a PSA 10 Bowman Chrome first autograph value higher than basically everybody Major League Baseball, not named Mike Trout, Clayton Kershaw, and Juan Soto. I might be missing somebody, but overall, he has one of the most expensive caliber of cards right now in the hobby. One thing I want to mention though, Juan Soto could be similar to Julio Rodriguez when it comes to how much hype he has. Soto was the guy people chased. He was the hobby darling. He was fun. Julio is fun on a great Mariners team, and they're going to be fun to watch. And Mariners fans love him, and he's going to be a Mariner for a long time. So for that purpose, there is still a higher ceiling. It's just riskier than the average person by far in baseball card collecting. So while there is a really high ceiling, there's also a pretty low floor he could hit if he has a sophomore slump or an injury, heaven forbid. So it's one of those things where you're taking on quite a bit of risk, high reward type guy right now. Me personally, I'm putting my money in other people, probably people more like these three, because I think I can have a little bit lower return, but more of a guaranteed return than I could with Julio. So definitely buy wisely and buy the right cards. I have a video again at the end of this video to highlight which cards are the right ones to target. Make sure you're being smart. Let me know in the comments below if you think he's a good buy or a bad buy right now. And other than that, I will see you in the next video.